Coming up on The Last Call, the Auburn Tigers were left chasing their own tail after a late rally comes up short, and a pair of calls and no calls in the last seconds sent Auburn back to the Plains. And today kicked off the 83rd edition of the Masters. Coming up, we'll show you how a pair of Auburn golfers, both from South Africa, are making history at Augusta National, and the local Columbus man who won it all more than 30 years ago. It's all on The Last Call, and it starts right now. Welcome back to The Last Call. I'm your host, Justin Holbrook, and I'm just going to set this down because we won't be needing it anytime soon. That's because Auburn's historic run in the Final Four ended in heartbreak last night in Minnesota. And without further ado, let's run it back. Auburn came into its Final Four game against Virginia having already made history. The Tigers had never been to the Final Four, and after beating Kansas, North Carolina, and Kentucky, the Tigers were one game away from playing for the national championship. Malik Dunbar wearing Chuma Okeke's jersey in warm-ups. Okeke went down with a torn ACL in the Sweet 16. Let's jump to the second half. Ty Jerome with the three-pointer, 7-point Virginia lead, largest of the game for either team. Jared Harper, though, keeping his team in it, 50-47 with that three-pointer. Virginia scored the next 7, including this 3, again for Jerome, and the Cavs are up 10 with 5:22 left. But Auburn kept fighting. Tigers scored 9 straight, only down by 1. Bryce Brown makes his 3rd straight 3 and gives Auburn a 2-point lead, less than 2 to go. First Auburn lead since the half. Kyle Guy from the corner, gotta have it, yes. Shrinks the Auburn lead to 1 with 7 seconds left. Huge moment in the game here. Jerome dribbles off the back of his foot, picks it up and keeps dribbling. By rule, that's a double dribble and should have been Auburn's ball, but it's not called and Virginia has a chance. Down by 2 with 1.5 on the clock. Inbounds pass to Guy, missed three-pointer, but a foul is called on the shot. Check it out. Samir Dowdy called for the foul, and Guy is going to go to the free throw line with a chance to win it. He sinks the first 2, and with a chance to go to the national championship, he drains the 3rd, and just like that, Auburn's historic season comes to a heartbreaking end as the Tigers fall 63-62.
We would be happier in victory, but God's blessed us all year long, and so I'm not going to be in a position where I'm going to ask for any more than what he's given us and trust him completely. And so we all feel really, really blessed. And yeah, we're disappointed, but we're also very proud.
Just hurts. Just felt like we had the game in the bag in the last 30 seconds. No, we was all emotional after the game.
Definitely an emotional moment right now. It was my last time I got to play with those seniors, and that's really what it was all about, just continuing to finish games and playing games with those guys, but it ended right here. But so definitely a lot of emotions going around the room, but we'll be fine.
Fans experienced those same emotions after the game, but some thought Auburn had actually won after that missed shot at the buzzer. Check it out.
Here on the Plains, the Auburn family went through a roller coaster of emotions, instantly going from jubilation, celebrating that their team went to the national championship, to moments later realizing that they actually celebrated way too early. Auburn fans were out in full force at Toomer's Corner like they had been all throughout March, but those fans missed the controversial foul call towards the end of the game and how Kyle Guy's clutch free throws sent Virginia to the title game. Unfortunately, it's a feeling that Auburn fans are all too familiar with.
I would like to punt something very far right now. I'm very upset. But War Eagle always, hey, it's Auburn being Auburn.
Some of these trees remain rolled. Usually that's a sign of an epic celebration. Now it's just kind of a bittersweet reminder.
Well, I thought we won the game. Then I seen he called a foul. On the replay, I don't think it was a foul. Not real sure. Haven't seen a good replay yet, but I don't think it was a foul yet. We should be in the championship game, but it is what it is.
Once the emotions settle, I can really realize how great this was, but until then, you know, I don't know. I'm overcome with emotion right now.
But even after this devastating loss, a lot of these fans remember how special this team was.
Unbelievable. I mean, I'm so happy for the guys, and I'm so happy for the team. I'm so happy for Auburn.
We did things we were never intended to do. Nobody believed in us, but they believed in them, and we believed in our team.
So as the season concludes, names like Jared Harper, Bryce Brown, and Chuma Okeke will always be remembered fondly by these Auburn fans. Reporting on your side on the Plains, I'm Rex Castillo, WRBL Sports.
Like those people said, there's no way around it. Last night's one-point loss to Virginia was heartbreaking for the Auburn basketball team. Despite being 1 second away from tomorrow's national championship, this team still had the greatest season ever in school history. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. The 2018-19 Auburn Tigers were the first to ever win 30 games in program history. And that 30th win over Kentucky in the Elite Eight put Auburn in its first ever Final Four. Before beating the Wildcats, the Tigers took down Kansas and North Carolina both by double digits. And the win over Kentucky came without arguably their best all-around player, Chuma Okeke, who suffered a torn ACL in the second half against the Tar Heels. And less than 24 hours after that deflating and crushing loss to Virginia, the Tigers returned home, where their fans, thousands of them, gave them a much-deserved hero's welcome.
You know, I came to Auburn just to further my basketball career. I say that all the time, and you know, making it to the Final Four, and then you know, being this ideal icon wasn't something I really seen in the future like that. But you know, it just goes to a hard work we've put in as a team, and just glad that we can be part of the team that made history.
But for these young kids to sacrifice like they have, to share, to not be jealous of another man's success, to rely on each other. On a big stage sometimes, that's incredible. And you know, young kids still want to be coached. They want discipline. They want to be loved, but they want to be held accountable. And that's what these guys have been doing all year long to become a great team. We maybe didn't start out as a great team, but we sure did become one.
They sure did. Congrats on a great season, fellas. We've run it back, and now it's time to look ahead to this week in the 83rd edition of the Masters. Let's keep an eye on the future. The Masters practice rounds start tomorrow, but this past week, one Auburn golfer took part in the first ever Augusta National Women's Amateur. Auburn sophomore Kaylee Telford was one of 72 golfers to qualify for the inaugural tournament. She went 3 under in round 1 on Wednesday, putting her in 3rd place all by herself. Round 2 did not go as well for the South African, who shot 6 over, but her overall score of 3 over was good enough to make the cut after surviving a playoff hole. That meant she got to play in the final round yesterday from Augusta National, where she went 1 under to finish tied for 12th.
I was a little bit nervous, but all in all I was very excited just to get going and out on this beautiful golf course. Everything about being here and all the crowds, I love the crowds out here, and playing in front of them has been good.
Coming up this week at the Masters, we'll take you inside Kaylee's journey to playing in the first ever Augusta National Women's Amateur. So Kaylee's time at Augusta National has ended, but another Auburn golfer is getting ready for his turn. Jovan Rubula joins only a handful of Auburn golfers to play on the game's biggest stage, the Masters. The junior qualified for the Masters by winning the British Amateur Championship back in June. The win also secured him a spot in the U.S. Open this coming June and the Open Championship last year. Jovan, like Kaylee, is from South Africa and has a pretty good DNA because his uncle is longtime golfer Ernie Els. I caught up with Jovan this past week to see how he's feeling heading into Masters Week.
To be able to experience this early in my amateur career, you know, or late amateur career, hopefully early professional career, is going to be really something special, you know. And for me to be able to see how I can perform, you know, at that elite level is going to be interesting for me, you know, and something that I'm really looking forward to.
Our coverage from Augusta. So as Jovan begins his Masters journey, one local golfer reflects on his improbable win at Augusta more than 30 years ago. Columbus resident Larry Mize won the Masters back in 1987 on a chip from off the green at the 11th hole to win his first and what would be his only major title. Here's Mize on that chip shot heard around the world.
I went pretty crazy. You know, people always say, "How did you feel?" And you know, you can tell from the video, I jumped and I'm running around and I am screaming. I'm going, yeah, you know, just yelling that I was just so excited. You know, it's exciting to be in that situation and then to chip in and have a chance to win. I finally getting on the green. I said, okay, let's shut up and let's let's go get the ball out of the hole and calm down and get ready to go to 12.
Winning the Masters means a lifetime invitation, so at 60 years old, He'll take part in this year's Masters. Rex Castillo will have his story this week. And speaking of that, we'll be in Augusta starting tomorrow to bring you those stories and much more throughout the week. You can catch the final 2 rounds right here on WRBL starting at 3 o'clock on Saturday and continuing at 2 o'clock on Sunday. All right, we're still serving on the last call, and coming up, Jack Patterson joins me for the next round to discuss the greatest season in Auburn basketball history. Welcome back, everyone. I'm joined once again by Jack Patterson. Jack, at this time last week, we were talking about Auburn making its first ever Final Four, and in the Final Four, they lost a very heartbreaking game to Virginia.
Heartbreak is the word, Justin. We were here in the studio watching the game, and just the way everything went down. You know, we saw the fans at Toomer's Corner thinking that the game was over.
That was
we thought the game was over.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's brutal how that game ends with the foul call with a second and a half to go. The non-call on Ty Jerome, was it a double dribble or not?
Definitely.
Absolutely. And then, you know, me personally, I don't think you make that call on the foul on Samir Dowdy, on Kyle Guy, but it is a correct call at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But still, just a heartbreaking way for Auburn's first trip to the Final Four to end. So close to the national championship game.
And the fact that they were that close in the game, they didn't even play that well. They shot less than 30% from 3. They only made 9 threes. In their 12-game win streak, they made at least 12 threes. So this team that's played very well and attacked the basket kind of succumbed to what Virginia likes to do to people, and they locked them down defensively, but they were still within the game the entire time.
But it tells you a lot about the mettle of that team, because, I mean, a lot of people could have said, you know, 10 points down 5 minutes ago, ball game, the way that game had been going, and then just to, you know, fight back, to keep going, keep pushing, and to take the lead, had a 4-point lead inside of 30 seconds to go. You know, 9 times out of 10 that falls your way. You know, like I said, we've already said it, you know, we've said it ad nauseum at this point, a crazy ending, a controversial ending to that game, but still a remarkable season for the Tigers.
And let's go to that, remarkable, because this is the only Auburn team to ever win 30 games in a season. The 30th win came against Kentucky in the Elite Eight to put Auburn in their first ever Final Four. For Bruce Pearl, who had also never been there before, history was made. That win over Kentucky was win number 100 for him at Auburn. This team just continued to make history, and they are, it's not a bias, it's not an opinion, they are the greatest Auburn basketball team.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Based on what they accomplished this season. And to do it as a football school, right, quote unquote, it's amazing to see this team emerge as a basketball powerhouse.
And it's amazing what this team did for this community, especially in light of the tornadoes that happened back on March 3rd.
Absolutely.
Before on Saturday night, they had not lost a game since those storms hit. What this team did for this community and for the university was absolutely amazing, and as a sports person, something I'll never forget.
And I think they'll be doing it for years to come.
Absolutely.
As long as Bruce Pearl is still at the helm. So congratulations to the Auburn basketball team on an incredible season and making these fans believe that you are also a basketball school. We'll be right back after this.
You still got Jared.
All right, everyone, I'm joined by Dustin Poirier fighting for the lightweight belt. It's the interim belt. Does that word mean anything to you, or is it just that next fight to get the title?
It's the next. It's the right step in the direction that my career is going. You know, this is years and years of work for me. People are going to say it's the interim, but for me, this is a world championship fight, and I know with the win, we unify the belts. So this is a world championship fight.
You and I were talking on the way in. It's a small world. I was actually interning with the UFC a couple years ago. Drove you to an interview. Now I'm doing the interview with you. 2 years ago, what state were you in? And did you ever think that this guy would be the same guy that was fighting for the title?
2 years ago, you know, I think I was just a few fights in at the lightweight division. I had just made a move up, maybe in 2005. So I was just getting my feet under me. Had a few wins in the lightweight division, and you know, I was heading here.
Yeah.
I was heading here.
And so you said even that you were surprised even by the fight when you got the call. So how do you go from just finding out about it to getting ready for a fight that's pretty much a month away, and it's a title fight nonetheless?
Yeah, this is a 5-round fight. I was getting frustrated, actually. I was in South Florida training, getting frustrated because I wasn't getting a fight booked, and I didn't know what was going to happen with the suspensions in the lightweight division and the holdup at the top of the division. And then they called me with this fight, and immediately, as soon as I hung up the phone, the switch flipped, and I was in training camp mode. And good thing I was already in Florida preparing.
I read somewhere too that you had even considered going back. You had actually booked a flight back.
Yeah.
So the timing of it. I mean, how do you explain that?
I went to South Florida at the beginning of January, just because I felt like something big was coming. And then 7 weeks of being there, nothing came, nothing. You know, I didn't get a call. So I was just like, I'm going to go back to Louisiana. I've been training and preparing for something. I never got the call. Let's go back home, visit family, cool off a little bit, reset, and then boom, the call came. I actually had flights booked. I had to call the UFC and switch everything up.
So you actually mentioned Louisiana. You're fighting for the belt in Atlanta. You train in Florida. How has this sport grown, though, in Louisiana, in the South? How has this sport, UFC, mixed martial arts, grown?
You know, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but mixed martial arts in general, in Louisiana, UFC was going there early days in Bossier City and stuff, but just combat sports, boxing in Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas, it's a really big scene, and it's been that way for a long time, and it's only getting stronger. There's shows every weekend, you know, in driving distance from where I'm from. It's not a huge wrestling area, Texas, Louisiana. You don't see a lot of collegiate wrestling, a lot of high school wrestling. Yeah. They have it, but it's just not as passionate as football or baseball is in that region. But it's growing. Now people are wrestling because of MMA. The new wave is coming. People know about this sport and want to wrestle, so it's just going to continue growing. I think, I mean, you see it, it's obvious all over. It's kind of sweeping this new movement of mixed martial arts. These kids are fighting and training at a young age and learning jiu-jitsu, you know. It's just going to continue booming, I think.
Up next, we're joined by another fighter taking part in UFC 236. Israel Adesanya is going for the middleweight interim belt this coming Saturday, and he explains what he needs to do to become a world champ. All right, everyone, I'm joined by Israel Adesanya, obviously going for the middleweight interim belt. I asked Dustin the same question. When you hear the word interim, does it even faze you?
Not really. Because, I mean, it works in my advantage better because with the new belt system, you don't really get a new belt for each belt you win. You get a ruby attached to your belt. So for me, I look at it this way. I get to get the interim belt, and then I get a new belt, which is the real belt when I beat Robert Whittaker. But yeah, so I get to have two belts, and yeah, it'll look good.
Well, you've been on the record too of saying you really don't even care about the belt. So if it's not the belt that's important, what is in this journey?
It's creating history, to be honest, and moments. Creating moments in history that'll be like there's an image of so many of Ali. There's so many of Ali, like iconic images, you know. I think when he beat Sonny Liston, standing over him, you know, that pose. And that I want to make moments like that in history through my story that I tell through fighting. Like my last one, I had an iconic one in the end of the first round when I hit Anderson with the Rock Lee stance. That's an iconic image that's gonna travel through time. And yeah, creating moments like that and having people 200 years from now talking about me like we talk about Ali.
Well, I mean, he even continued one of those moments by saying, I passed the baton on to you. What was it like to hear that from a guy that you grew up idolizing in this sport?
That's crazy. That's not one of the best. That whole event, just fighting with him and afterwards, that's not just one of the best moments of my career. It's one of the best moments of my life, you know, so yeah, that one's one for the books. That's one for the history books, and no one can take that away from me.
Speaking of making history, Kamaru Usman just became the first, not only Nigerian, but first African-born fighter to ever win a UFC title. And so now you could become the second, not only in your country, but in the continent as well. What does that say about the sport, not only in Nigeria, but also in Africa, as guys are starting to pick the sport up?
Like, there's always, with fighting, there's always a group or a culture that's dominating. Like, you know, in the beginning when the UFC started in the 90s, the Brazilians were the ones dominating. And at some point the Americans took over, and then, you know, like even the Kiwis as well, we took over right now. We're on top right now. But I'm telling people, like, start working because Africans are coming. And when that happens, run.
Welcome back. Week 1 didn't go so great for the Braves. They were swept in Philadelphia to start the year, but could set things right this week when they played at home for the first time. Braves hosted the Cubs and swept them right out of Atlanta, scoring 23 runs and at least 6 in each game. They followed that up with a win and a loss against Miami, which brings us to today's rubber match against the Fish. Sean Newcomb on the hill making his second start of the year. Braves and Marlins tied Game 3 rubber match, like I said, and then Freddie Freeman with his first dinger of the season, 2-run shot, and the Braves lead 2-0. Miami ties it, but in the fourth, Dansby Swanson unties it. Almost the same exact spot as Freeman, and Atlanta is back on top 3-2. Luis Vizcaino trying to get the save in the ninth, but that doesn't go well. Curtis Granderson to straightaway center, and we're tied at 3. And in the bottom of the ninth, with the bases loaded, Dansby Swanson walks it off. First walk-off win of the year for the Braves, who go 5-1 in their first week at home. I couldn't trust myself with $100 at 21 years old, but the Atlanta Braves trust 21-year-old Ronald Acuna Jr. with $100 million. The 2018 National League Rookie of the Year signed an 8-year, $100 million extension, making him the youngest MLB player to sign a contract worth that much. The deal also includes a $10 million buyout and 2 club option years that could push it to 10 years for $124 million.
It really wasn't about the money, to be honest. This is the team I grew up with, so this is the team that I want to be here. I want to be a part of this team, and hopefully I want to retire here. It really was. That's what I'm looking for.
Acuna has struggled a bit this year, but the Braves are no doubt keeping a great player for many years to come. Thanks so much for watching The Last Call. We're on every Sunday at 11:30. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at WRBL Sports. The James Brown Show is next. We'll have coverage of the Masters all week long. See you next week.